Welcome back to Curiousico. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Tony.
And this is the first episode in a new series we are calling Cup of Curiosity, where we talk about a topic of curiosity.
It could be paranormal, urban legend, true crime, anything that's weird or curious or in that realm. It's right up our alley.
Yeah, so grab a glass or a cup of your favorite beverage and sit back because today I'll be talking about the Black-Eyed Children.
Roll intro. Alright, so it's the first episode of this new series, like Shannon said, and you're probably wondering why we're calling it Cup of Curiosity. We like to drink around here. Not just wine, but coffee, beer, Kool-Aid, water, LaCroix, anything really. And today we are turning to an old favorite, 19 Crimes. Close up. 19 Crimes, their red blend. It's super, super good. We go through a lot of bottles of this. And if you guys haven't tried, you should do the AR app. It's called Living Wine, I think. Download it, and it works with all the 19 Crimes bottles and a couple of other brands. But you hold your phone up, and the guy on the front talks. It's really cool.
Super cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Hashtag not sponsored.
It's delicious, yet.
Almost every time we go to the store for a bottle of wine,
It's
usually
$10 and it's delicious. Yeah.
Would recommend.
Cool. Okay, so we're talking about what?
Okay, are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So I got my laptop here just so I can reference my notes because I did a fair bit of research.
I did no research.
Yeah, so you don't know anything about
Nothing.
this, right? Okay, so
No.
you don't know anything about this topic. So we're going to talk about the Black-Eyed Children.
This is the prequel to the Black Eyed Peas.
Yeah.
Before Fergie.
Yeah, before they were famous, before they had Fergie, they were the Black-Eyed Children.
Okay.
No. So they're called the Black-Eyed Children, sometimes the Black-Eyed Kids, or BEKs for short. You might see, like...
Okay.
You'll see it referenced every once in a while on, like, creepypasta and places like that. Some people relate it to, like, the Slender Man urban legends and things like that.
Is it real, or is it...
So... That's up for debate.
Legend.
So I would classify it as an urban legend. It's more of like a modern urban legend. But we'll get into it.
Okay.
I think it holds more weight than the Slender Man stories.
No, Slender Man's completely real.
Okay.
He's terrifying.
Sure. Okay. So, the Black-Eyed Children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like I said, it's a spooky urban legend about children with black eyes. A little background on them. So they're thought to be between the ages of 6 and 16. So like young children to early teenage years.
All the worst years.
The worst years, yeah. They're thought to be between those ages roughly. There's some argument about that. They're often seen in pairs. Sometimes they're alone, but normally they come in sets of 2. And encounters with them are usually on people's doorsteps or on the side of the road.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So there are children who have black eyes who will come visit you, and they knock on your door, or your window, or your car. Which is creepy enough to think about.
Yeah.
A normal child doing that.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Yeah. All right.
So let's get into some of the stories about these black-eyed children.
Uh-huh.
So there's actually claims that the children have been seen as early as the 1950s. However, it's thought that the first report of an encounter with these kids was from a man named Brian Bethel, and that was in 1996. So around then, in the 90s, that's like when it started popping up on the internet. Granted, the internet was pretty early then, but that's kind of when people started referencing the Black-Eyed Children. So Bethel was a journalist from Texas. So there's like a little bit of weight held to that because he wasn't just some random guy telling a story. Like he was a legit journalist. He was a reporter from Texas.
Fake news.
Yeah, you could argue, whether that has anything to do with his reputableness. But yeah, so his encounter is the first one that's normally referenced. So his story is he had encountered 2 children when he was on his way one evening to pay a bill. This was back when you would, pay your bills in person. I think it was an internet bill.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was like going to the place to pay his bill. In the evening, he's on his way. He pulled over because he realized he needed to finish writing out his check. So he pulls over by a nearby movie theater, using like the light from the theater to just write out his check. So he's sitting there writing out his check when he looks up, and he's interrupted by a knock on his car window. Tap, tap, tap. He looks up. He sees 2 boys standing right outside his window in the dark.
Nope.
Now, normally you'd see 2 kids standing outside your window. You wouldn't think anything malicious is happening. You're like, oh
no, I always think so.
You might. Yeah. If you're Tony, you would probably immediately think that. So he rolls his window down just a crack and looks at these boys. And the second he looks at them, a rush of fear comes over him. Chills, like the worst fear comes over him. He looks at them, and he sees 2 boys standing outside his car. One's older than the other. He believes around 12 years old, the younger one around 9. He's just guessing. They had hooded sweatshirts on, so it's masking their face a little bit. They had hoodies on. It's dark. He just sees these 2 little kids. So he's looking at them, and it wasn't until he got a good look at them that he realized something was off about them and why he felt so terrified when he looked at them. Because, like their name says, their eyes were completely pitch black. So he's looking at these kids. He actually reports, in his words, he describes the eyes as being soulless orbs, like 2 great swaths of starless night, is how he described it.
Wow.
Yeah, very poetic.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, Bethel is just frozen in fear, looking at these kids, doesn't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he's looking at these boys.
Yeah.
And it's the older one who speaks for them. And later, people would go on to describe this older boy as the spokesperson.
They talk?
They talk. So they tap on his window, and they ask him if they can have a ride home, because they were at the movie theater and they wanted to see a movie, but they didn't have enough money, so they wanted to go home to their mom to get money. So they're like, tap, tap, tap. Sir, can we have a ride home? We want to see this film.
This was 1990 what?
1996.
And they said, sir?
They might not have said sir. That was me on purpose. And they probably didn't say sir. Although they could have. It would have been typical for a black-eyed child to say that. We'll get into that.
Oh, okay.
So they're like, can we have a ride home? And he's feeling very uneasy, and they can tell he's like not wanting to give him a ride.
Yeah.
And they're persistent. They say, it won't take long. We're just kids. We don't have a gun or anything. His words. And it wasn't...
And they're in Texas?
This is Texas.
Never know.
But they're persistent. They're saying, like, please, can we come in? It won't take long. We're just kids. Which, as I go through some other stories, you'll see that's a typical thing for black-eyed children to say. We're just kids. We're just children. Let us in.
Okay.
And it wasn't until then that Bethel realized he was subconsciously reaching for his car door to open it to let them in. And once he realized that, he stopped himself, put his car in gear, and took off. And he looks in his rearview mirror, and the boys were gone.
Right, yeah. Because they ran away.
He says they're nowhere to be found, and to this day, he stands by his story.
Mm-hmm.
So, that is the first report of the black-eyed children. Since then, there have been countless reports of other people seeing black-eyed children coming up to their cars, coming up to their houses. They've even been seen hitchhiking down streets in the middle of the night.
Yeah, screw this.
creepy. So you could discredit his encounter and other people's encounters and just say that they're kids playing pranks. But would they be wearing contact lenses in 1996? Probably not. Or that maybe he was just paranoid and he didn't know what he saw. But like I said, since then there have been hundreds of accounts of similar experiences with the black-eyed children. So let's see.
Well, this is one experience I do not want to have.
Exactly. Yeah, so like I said, they've been seen normally one of three ways: coming up to your car, or hitchhiking, knocking on your door in the middle of the night, or tapping on your window in the middle of the night. They all have common similarities to all of these stories. The kids are usually seen in pairs, and one child is usually older than the other, and he or she is usually the one that is speaking for the two of them. Their faces are usually obscured, sometimes by hoods, and they're often seen looking down at the ground at first, and because they're usually seen at night, it makes it even harder for you to notice their eyes at first. So they get these people's attention because they appear to be just these normal kids, and it's not until usually it's too late that people realize something's off about them.
Yeah.
Weirdly, their complexions are usually reported as being pale and olive-toned, not olive-tone like the typical like olive-tone skin. Olive-tone is in like the color of olives, like green and pale and unearthly looking. They wear strange, like plain and inconspicuous clothing sometimes, like just like unidentifiable clothing, like no markings on them. Some even have seen them wearing like old-fashioned handmade clothing, almost as if they're like Mennonites or Amish. Just weird inconspicuous clothing. And then of course all the stories have in common the eyes are completely black of the children, which is obviously the most unnerving thing about them. Everyone reports having a sense of intense fear and dread come over them as soon as they see them, even before the children start speaking to them. And once they do start speaking to these people, every encounter, the children always want something. They want to come inside your home. They want to come inside your car. They'll say, "Can we come in? We need to call our mom. Can we come in? We need a ride." Things like that. And if the people seem reluctant to do so, or they try to say no, the children are persistent. They keep saying, "Please, can we come in? It won't take long. We're just children." So let's see. So yeah, they're very persistent. People always say that immediately something is off about them, whether it's their clothes or the way they're acting or the way they're talking. They're not acting like a normal child would act.
Yeah.
Like normally you would see like a 7-year-old kid, if they were to come up to your door in the middle of the night, they would be fidgety and, acting like a kid.
Right.
These children are very like calm and composed and persistent.
Aliens.
Possibly.
Did I ruin the story?
No, I mean that's...
Yeah, it sounds like an alien or a vampire.
Yeah. So there's a lot of theories about, like, what are they? What could they be? So
we're just kids,
We're just kids.
Kids are
super
awful.
creepy thing to say. Like, another thing, what child would say that? As a kid, I would never have said, "I'm just a kid.
Yeah, that's weird.
Let me in."
Yeah.
So, so something is always off about them. Their stories often don't make sense. Sometimes they're phrased weird. Again, as if like, sometimes they talk as if they're an adult, like not like a child would talk. There's one account I read that the person even recalled, it was an account of a black-eyed child knocking on their door late at night, and they knocked on the door and the person answered and they said, "Hi, can we come in and use your telegraph?" And this was modern day. So things like that, things that are just weird. Another thing they have in common is animals always sense that something's wrong during these encounters. People that have pets, cats and dogs, they often they start whining, they bark before the person even gets to the door or realizes someone is even there, which is kind of a common theme with encounters of strange paranormal things. think animals usually sense something's wrong before we do.
Except Neville, he's just asleep.
He's asleep. Thought he would make an appearance, but
He's being a good boy.
He is being a good boy. It's very surprising. Yeah, so those are the things most black-eyed children accounts have in common. And they always end when people finally just refuse to let them in. They've had enough. They just will shut the door and just give up and won't answer or say no. And eventually the children just disappear. Now there's one of the theories stems from them always asking to come in, and there's even reports of them saying, please, we can't come in unless you tell us we can come in.
Yeah, like a vampire.
Yeah, so far, from all the reports I've read, there haven't been accounts of them forcing their way in or just coming in without you saying, like, okay, or opening the door. And yeah, there's multiple accounts of them saying, we can't come in unless you tell us we can come in. So that's strange. So most accounts usually end there. However, there are a few reports of people who have
I was going to ask
let them into their homes.
What dinguses?
So I'm going to read you an account of a woman who claims that she saw the black-eyed children and let them inside of her house. This was featured on weekandweird.com. Okay, so this is her account. Let me start by saying that I know how hard this all is to believe. But now that things have taken a turn for the worse, I started looking for stories similar to mine. I feel like I should share this story with someone, and your website seems like the right place. Weekend Weird. I made the mistake of letting the black-eyed kids inside, and now I'm worried that I might die because of it. I hope this will be a warning to everyone who is ever in the position to make the same mistake that I did. I live just outside of a rural town in Vermont. It's a tight-knit community where everyone knows one another, and people don't lock their doors at night. There has never been any need to. A little over a year ago, I woke up because I heard a loud banging on my front door. At the time, my husband and I lived in a small home on a dirt road just off of the rural route into town. It was the middle of a snowstorm, and the nearby hills get very slippery in the snow, so I thought that someone might have been in an accident and broken down. It's happened before. When I looked out the window, I could see that our motion spotlight was on. I could see that there were footprints in the snow that had come from our road and into our driveway, but there was no car anywhere. The snow was still covering the road, and no one had driven on it for at least a couple of hours. Our front door was obscured from the window, but I could see that someone was standing there. I wasn't sure what to think, so I woke my husband just to feel safer. When I was telling him what was going on, the banging on the door started again, and my husband went to answer it while I stood in the hallway. When he opened the door, there were two children standing in the snow, looking towards the ground. They were a boy and a girl, and could not have been more than 8 years old. They were dressed strangely and had odd haircuts. The girl's hair was very long and straight, and the boy had a dated haircut that looked almost like a bowl cut. They weren't dressed for winter, and my first thought was that they must have been Mennonite children. But as far as I know, there was never a large community of Mennonites near us. Thinking back on it, I know my normal reaction to seeing children in a snowstorm would have been to rush inside and bundle them up with some blankets and hot cocoa. But that's not how this felt. The children were very unnerving. They would not make eye contact when my husband asked them if everything was okay, and they asked if they could come in. My husband looked at me like, what do I do? And asked the kids where their parents were. They'll be here soon, is all they said. It was around 2 o'clock in the morning at this point, so the only reasonable thought in my head was that there must have been an accident or these kids got lost. As much as my instincts told me not to bring them inside, I did it anyway. I went into the kitchen to make some hot cocoa while my husband took them into the living room. While I was fixing the kettle, I could hear my husband talking to the kids. He was asking them if they were okay, where they came from, how far they walked, if their parents' car was broken down, things like that. but they always answered, "Our parents will be here soon." They spoke in a sing-songy voice. They weren't afraid to be in a stranger's home at all. I started to notice that our cats were all hiding, except Pigeon, who was in the kitchen with me. It's an adorable cat name. Normally, our cats are very curious and friendly, and we have to be careful that they don't run out the door when we leave. This time, none of them even tried to see who was here, which I thought was very strange. All of the hair on Pigeon's neck was standing up, and his tail was puffed up while he looked in the living room. When I bent down to pet him and see what was wrong, he hissed and started growling, and backed up until he had hid himself under the kitchen island. I have never seen him do that before. When I walked back into the living room, the kids were sitting on the couch as still as can be, but my husband was holding his head in his hands. I asked him what was wrong, and he just said he felt very dizzy all of a sudden, but he was fine. I turned back to the children to give them their cocoa, but when they looked at me, I gasped. It took everything in me not to drop the mugs and run away. When they looked at me, their eyes were completely black. They had no whites, just giant pupils. When they saw that I was scared, they stood up and asked if they could use the bathroom. I tried to be as composed as I could be and showed them down the hall. They went to the bathroom together, and I hurried back to my husband to ask if he had seen their eyes. He had seen them too, and said that it looked like his brother's badly bruised eyes after a car accident. We were in the middle of talking about those children, about whose children they could be, when my husband's nose started to bleed. He'd never had nosebleeds as long as I had known him. I just knew inside myself that this had something to do with the kids in the bathroom, and I started crying while I ran to get my husband some tissues. That's when the power went out.
F that.
I heard my husband yell my name from the living room, and as I started to walk back through the hallway, I stopped dead in my tracks. The two children were standing at the end of the hallway.
Of course.
They weren't moving, and I had never been so scared in my whole life. They just stood there in the dark. After what felt like forever, the boy said, "Our parents are here." And they walked to the door, opened it, and walked out, leaving it wide open. My husband jumped up to go close it and almost fell over. We looked out the window and saw two men standing by a black car idling at the end of our driveway. The men looked like they were wearing black-colored suits and were very tall. At least 6 feet. When my husband waved at them, they just stared at us, got into the car, and drove off. Our power came on about a half an hour later, but nothing was the same after that. Over the next few months, 3 of our cats went missing. We can only assume that they ran away somewhere and never came back, but the worst thing was coming home to find Pigeon in a puddle of blood on the living room floor.
What the absolute?
He looked like he had been vomiting blood. The vet told us that he had some kind of hemorrhage. After my husband's nosebleeds became a regular occurrence, we went to see the doctor. He didn't know what to make of it other than dry nasal passages. But my husband was diagnosed with an aggressive skin cancer. When the doctor asked us if he used tanning beds, we both thought he was joking, but apparently this kind of melanoma is linked to overuse of indoor tanning. The doctors think he will recover but don't understand how he got it so bad so quickly. My husband has never worked an outdoor job and spends relatively little time in the sun. Since we let the black-eyed kids inside our home, I've also suffered from regular dizzy spells and nosebleeds on a regular basis. I've had other issues which I won't mention here, but trust me when I say that I am suddenly in the worst condition of my life and no one can do anything about it. I know that all of this is because I let the black-eyed children into my home. We've told everyone we could about the strange kids that showed up that night, but no one else saw them, and some laughed at how scared we were of the Mennonite kids, but we know what we saw. I wish my husband had never opened the door. And then she says, "Feel free to publish this as a warning to others about the black-eyed kids. My advice would be to lock your doors, call the police, and wait for morning. Don't make the same mistake that I did."
The absolute hell.
So that's just one account of a woman who says she's actually let them into her house. Should we wait for him to separate?
Do you think he's barking at them?
Don't.
There will be no more driving at night. All the doors will be locked.
So I've been researching this like for the past week,
Yeah.
and haven't told you anything about it. So
So
this
that's
episode,
why when he was scratching at whatever it was. Jesus. Okay.
I've been like on edge every night. Yeah, Neville, our cat, was scratching at something in the middle of the night, and I was like reading stuff about this, and it just gave me chills. So now you're in on it with me.
Yeah, wonderful.
Welcome to the club.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's just one account of a woman who claims she actually let them in. But if you just Google black-eyed children, there's hundreds of accounts of people who have seen them in different situations.
I won't be Googling anything.
Yeah. So who are these children? What do you think? There's a few theories.
I think there's.
Out there.
It's. I mean, it sounds like there's some sort of alien.
Yeah.
And the men in black literally came and picked them up.
Yeah.
Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah. So
and
one
Will
of the
Smith made an appearance.
Yeah. So if you've ever heard of the Men in Black legends, not the movie Men in Black, but
also the movie Men in Black.
Also that, I suppose. They're not related, are they? The two, like the story of Men in Black.
I think. Right?
I don't know.
The Men in Black, aren't they like alien protector?
I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's, yeah.
Okay, so if you've heard of the Men in Black, yeah, some believe they're related to them, and that they're some sort of alien-human hybrid, that they travel with the Men in Black. But if that's the case, like, what do they want? Because they don't seem to explicitly ever hurt someone. There's only been a few cases of people claiming to have let them in, and bad things happen after, but it's not clear what are they wanting, why are they wanting in.
Yeah. That's super weird.
Some think they're just wanting to have contact, or they're just wanting to, I don't know, it's pretty unclear what they want. If they are extraterrestrial in nature, or they're just trying to like gain intel on humans, which would kind of explain why they don't always sound right, why they say different things, like they're not clear on like what it is to be a normal human, so they don't know how to act. There's also theories that maybe they're paranormal, or even demonic in nature, which I kind of rolled my eyes at first, but the more I read about it, it kind of makes sense, especially because of them explicitly asking to come in every time. That's the main argument for them being demonic in nature, because stories of demons are, they don't come into your home unless you let them in. And that's one consistent thing in most of the stories, is that all of the children say, we can't come in unless you say we can come in.
Maybe it's an alien thing.
It could be. So, yeah, I'm leaning more towards extraterrestrial. I don't know.
I don't like it.
No, I don't like it either. So yeah, now when I'm out at night and see like kids walking around, it creeps me out. Especially the idea of them like walking down a street hitchhiking late at night. Yeah,
and we live in a pretty rural area.
Yeah.
So you'd have to pass a few houses to even get.
Yeah. And it seems like they're most often seen in rural areas, or
right. Let's move to the city.
Or if anything, they're usually seen at night when people aren't really out.
Yeah.
So, pretty creepy. But that's the black-eyed children.
Great. Nightmares.
Still not sure what they are, but yeah, definitely the stuff of nightmares. But whatever they are, the general consensus is to obviously never let them in if you see them. Because nothing good could probably come of that.
Great. Thanks for that.
You're welcome. Black-eyed children.
Yay.
Cheers.
Finish this.
So we hope you enjoyed the first episode of Cup of Curiosity. Next time, I think Tony's going to research a topic.
Won't be as creepy as that, for sure.
Yeah, who knows? It'll be different every time.
Yeah.
We're into all kinds of stuff, yeah. I'm super into true crime, so I'm definitely going to hit on that soon, for sure. But yeah, hopefully it can kind of like fill the space when we can't always go out exploring new places.
Yeah, I mean, we sit on the couch and watch Netflix too, so.
Yeah. Yeah. So we thought it'd be cool for you guys to just like hang with us and talk about weird shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. All right.
Well, if you're new here, subscribe. If you like the video, hit the thumbs up. That's what the cool kids are doing. If you haven't tried 19 Crimes, the Red Blend, or really any of them are good. This is just our go-to. Give that a whirl. It's delicious. It's well worth the $10. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for hanging out.
Yeah. We'll see you next time.
See ya.